things.
Yeah, so if you've attended some of our last few webinars, you'll notice we continue to use this one big word here at the top, entrusted, because that's part of why Smart Church Solutions exists, is to help churches, better steward what has been entrusted to them. So can anybody relate to this? How could anyone think this department is understaffed? Yes, you have plenty of hard hats and tool belts and mops and hammers sitting in a closet, but no people to actually pick them up. There's the opposite problem with this, though, that I have seen rarely, but on occasion, is the overstaffed situation, where you got people all over each other, and how many people does it really take to hold up a do not pass sign while they're paving the roads and everything else? So we've all seen that. What ends up happening with what we're seeing with the responses is most of you end up being this. You end up being that Swiss Army knife trying to do 101 things. And I've got 2 or 3 Swiss Army knives, and I love them for certain things, but I don't want to use it to drive nails. I don't want to use my Swiss Army knife screwdriver to hand turn a 4-inch screw going into a piece of wood. So it's great for certain things, but let's face it, the Swiss Army knife isn't the best solution in every case. So we did a nationwide survey back in 2020, because what else were you going to do during the middle of COVID but do a national survey? So we did a national survey. We had hundreds of churches look at this from every size, from 30,000 square feet to well over 200,000. We took about 6 months to assemble this. And what I'm going to do is I just want to show you a couple of the results that we got related to staffing. Before I show you that, though, based on our assessment and based on what IFMA, International Facility Managers Association, says, you need 1 FTE, full-time equivalent, full-time employee, however you want to describe the acronym, for every 35,000 square feet. And that is just for general maintenance. That does not include cleaning and whatnot. So with that in mind, okay, there we go. So we asked about maintenance staff. Do you do it in-house? Do you do it outsourced? Do you do it volunteer, or do you do it some kind of other way? On the majority, 80% said that they did at least some form of in-house cleaning. 60% do some form of outsourced cleaning. 42% use volunteers for some form or another, which was actually very pleasing for us to see that almost 50% of all the respondents use volunteers in some form or fashion. But you can see there they're broken down by square footages and whatnot. We get asked constantly when it comes to cleaning, are we better to insource or outsource? And the answer is always yes. Because we talk to somebody that insources and they just switch to outsource and they think it's the greatest thing ever. We have some that outsource, move to insource, and they think it's the greatest thing ever. Going back to the earlier question, some of this depends on the culture you're trying to create within your church and the flexibility you may want to have from a scaling back of staff if you need to. I have some churches that want to keep their staff culturally in line with the vision and mission of the church, and so they're better to do that with in-house staff. I've seen others that want the flexibility of being able to terminate somebody whenever they need to, and so an outsourced person eliminates some of the HR issues that you have. But what we haven't found yet is a massive disparity in cost. And you could make the case that the outsourcing costs more, maybe. If you were getting exact apples for apples in cleanliness, number of cleans, and all the other things, we generally find that there's not always a huge disparity. By the time you have to pay vacation time, pay benefits, and other things like that, insourcing and outsourcing isn't always all that far off. So that was maintenance staffing. In-house for cleaning. You'll see some of the numbers there fairly. And all this is available. Lee put the link, right, Lee? You put the link in the chat. So the link's there if you want to get this information. This one was one that really kind of caught our attention. And this one actually took me off guard. We asked the question, how are we utilizing our time? And we asked it for custodial personnel and maintenance personnel. Based on the data we got, approximately 13 hours a week is lost time per FTE for janitorial. If we are staying on task only 65% of the time for janitorial, we're losing almost 13 hours a week of a typical 40-hour week.
And to clarify, FTE is full-time employee.
Full-time, yeah, full-time employee, full-time equivalent, depending on which business school you went to. So now what we don't know, again, with any survey like this, people can interpret the question and the answers differently. So when we ask the question, percentage of time on task, that could have been interpreted different ways. So I don't want to make assumptions there, but looking at this, it would appear that we're only getting 65% efficiency, at least of the respondents, from our janitorial custodial teams. It was worse on the maintenance teams. We're losing approximately 20 hours a week, or half of our time, with our maintenance personnel. So think of this example, and this is something that we did a couple of years ago when we were trying to evaluate: are you better to insource a painting of a room or outsource painting of a room? So you could hire somebody that has the drop cloths, has the paintbrush, the paint, the ladder, all the other tools and components that they need, or you could have somebody insource do it. Well, they need to run to Lowe's first and buy all that material, buy the paintbrush, stop and get a biscuit on the way back, or grab a taco or whatever they're going to do, get back to the job. They start doing it, then they get a call that there's a spill on aisle 5 somewhere and they need to run down and clean that up. Then they got to come back and start over again. And oh, by the way, they're not that great of a painter, and so you got to come back and clean up even more, and so on. We found that in many cases, when you looked at it from that perspective, it cost you more to do it in-house than out of house, just because of the efficiency of time. And so that's just something we've got to look at, is if our staff are not spending at least 80% of their time on task, because there's going to be downtime, there's going to be water cooler chatting, there's going to be interdepartmental meetings, there's going to be other things that you feel like you're not on task. But if we're losing half of our time on our maintenance by not being on task, that's an awful lot of money. So one of the questions we're asked regularly then is, volunteers, are they a good idea or not? I'd be curious, and throw it up in the chat, how many of you are using volunteers for either cleaning, maintenance, or yard care?
Don't be shy. None. Hey, Luke. None. Kenji.
So Sandy and Ellen raised their hands. I'm not sure if that's because they're using volunteers.
Volunteers for painting. I think they may have done that on accident.
Yeah. Okay.
Volunteers for painting. We were until COVID for volunteers, occasional work parties. Lizette said yes. Only occasionally. Volunteers for cleaning, very, very little. We are, but just occasionally. Some volunteers for lawn and special projects that come up. Okay. Volunteers for setup and tear down. That's great.
Yeah. And some of those are excellent opportunities for volunteers. The things you need to be considering with volunteers is liability, insurance, having the proper tools for them, having the proper protective equipment. You need to think twice, 3 times, 10 times whether or not you really want volunteer climbing up a ladder. There's certain tasks that we need to be very cautious of about asking our volunteers to do. However, there are plenty of tasks that good-hearted volunteers should and could be involved with, that they want to be involved with. It gives them an opportunity to serve without maybe having to be part of the nursery. I'll do that one. I'll help clean up on a field day if I don't have to serve a nursery. So I think we've got to use them, and we're going to give you some ideas later on of things that you might consider that would fit volunteers. One of the challenges we find with volunteer labor, though, is how quickly they can wane. You say, hey, we're going to do work days for the next 6 Saturdays. And on your first Saturday, you have 50 people. On the next Saturday, you have 20. And by the time you get to the 6th, you're the only one that shows up. And so relying on them for certain things can be a slippery slope, if you will, and it can lead to frustration for you and for the church. So we'll come back to some volunteer things here in a little bit. Another opportunity that we have when you're understaffed, besides using volunteers, is to consider things such as automation. And automation does not need to be a scary thing. How many of you have a Ring doorbell or have a security system where you can unlock your door from your mobile app, or turn on your Nest thermostat at home? All of those are forms of automation. And so we actually, in our survey, we looked at how many hours, we asked how many hours people were spending adjusting thermostats up and down, and it was hours per day that most of the respondents were doing things. Well, that's not something in most cases that takes rocket science. And so do we need to consider some automation opportunities to take that off of a human being's responsibility plate and let them focus on things that only a human being can do?
And to piggyback off that too, I think a huge component, I come from a paradigm being a little bit of a penny pincher, but I think it's really important also to invest in productivity. And I don't just mean in an automation or a software point of view, but also of a point of view of, emptying trash. Can we invest in trash carts to save time rather than carrying 2 to 3 bags at a time to the dumpster? What about cable carts, dollies, chair carts? What if we got something like a billy goat blower to sweep our parking lots? I think there's lots of equipment in the facility world that you can invest in that will also save time. And then taking a step back and really taking into account, and this will help you present it to the rest of the team and your boss, is, okay, based on the budget, how much time do I spend a month doing this? And how much time would something like this truly save me? And how much is that really worth if we can put it into a figure, a dollar figure, and using that kind of number to project, will this be something that returns on investment, or is this just a fancy toy I want because I want it, right? So I think taking that approach to things too is just as effective.
Yep, agreed. Okay, I'm just Doug, I'm responding to you in the chat, so let you see that. Great. So
did you answer his question?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep. So one of the things that we want to look at is, where are the areas that we should focus? It is way too easy to shotgun our approach and end up not getting anything done. If I don't start my day looking at the things I need to get done and I just start doing things, I generally don't get anything done, or I don't get as much done, or I'm definitely not as efficient in getting things done. And so, think about a couple of focus areas. When you're understaffed, one of your primary focus things should be clean. Guests will see dirty and they will remember it. I have used the example many times where my wife and I, Lee's a triplet, and when he was a wee lad, we used to go to one of our grocery stores on Saturdays for an activity. And we would take them, inevitably with 3 kids at all the same age, you end up going to the restroom multiple times, any place you go. And this store across the street from us had very, very nice bathrooms. They weren't dirty. They had nice floors. There was no stained ceiling tile. Trash wasn't hanging out over the trash receptacles. Nothing opulent. It was all pretty standard stuff, but they were clean. And that always stuck out to me that, okay, they care about me as their guest, that they keep a clean restroom. So, think about it. If that's your experience at a secular grocery store, if they come to your church on Sunday, will they experience something similar? And again, we're not trying to keep up with the Joneses here, but will it be a similar kind of experience for them? So restrooms then, go along hand in hand. Think about the comfort of your occupants. Is the temperature of the building comfortable? Your public areas are going to greatly impact first-time guests, including floors, wall conditions, ceiling condition, lighting, wayfinding. As Ellen knows, because I did an assessment for her, and now that Cody has had Nathan on his site, I'm kind of weird. I walk in and I look at floors and ceilings right off the bat. I'm looking for dirty floors. I'm looking for stained ceiling tiles. I'm looking for dirty air filters. I'm looking for duct tape on the floor, and so on and so forth. As a first-time guest to any facility, not just churches, those are things that I'm looking for. I know I'm weird, but just deal with it. But those are things that let me know fairly quickly, do these people really care about their building? Do they care about their facility? And moreover, do they care about me as the occupant of their facility? When you're thinking budgeting and particularly life cycle expectancy, then think of the big 4: HVAC, roofing, paving, and flooring. Those are 4 items that are big ticket items. They require maintenance, and they directly have an impact on your church's ministry. If I'm up in Portland, Maine in January and I can't get heat in my facility, it's going to be really hard to have church. If my roof leaks and I start having water damage and I can't use certain rooms, that's going to impact the ministry of the church. If I have potholes all over my parking lot, that's going to impact what spaces I can park in and whether or not a guest is going to be comfortable sitting with flooring. Another area is to look at automating things. And we've already hit on that, but I wanted to add it to this list of focus areas.
And while we go back to that too, that Luke Luttrell had a great question. I think this would be a good time to chime in on, is what's the best way to determine a return on investment on automation, data and analytics, like HVAC doors, things like that?
Great question. On HVAC, there's 2 levels of ROI, rate of return. The first is to look at what's my cost of doing it versus what is my savings in utility costs. So if I have to spend $5,000, but I save $10,000 in the first year, I'm getting a 200% return on my money.
And you can think about, okay, how much time does this take me a month to do? Based on my salary or my hourly pay, what is that worth? That's your first factor there. The second factor is really think about, this is a lot harder to identify. It's easier to identify the operational costs, right? But in terms of utility costs, people kind of sometimes want a magic bullet. Well, how much money will this save me a year to automate? Where reality is ask yourself the question, how many times do you think you have rooms that are empty where your HVAC is blowing, and how are you not utilizing that the best, and really take account for it. If you have your team that changes it, if an event's canceled an hour prior, you have your team that's going to run over and change thermostats, you're probably doing a great job from a utility point of view, but it's probably costing you a lot of money from an operational.
Yeah.
But then if you fail in the operational, you're probably lacking more in utilities. So it's kind of this weird balance.
Yeah, we've had churches that have reported 20 to 30% operational and staffing savings. So let's give you a quick example. In our survey, there were some churches that reported as much as 6 hours a week in changing thermostats and temperatures and adjusting for events. Let's assume, just for giggles and grins, that you pay your staff $18 an hour, just for giggles and grins, and it's 6 hours. That's $108 a week. So in a year, if I go 52 weeks, that's $5,600 in manpower time. And it's easy for churches to say, well, we're already paying that, so why would we invest in something else? Well, knowing that you're probably understaffed in every area, those 6 hours a week, which equate to 15% of a person's time, is there other things that they could be doing that you're not doing right now that should be done, that it would be more efficient to use them for that kind of thing? The other piece of it that you can calculate, it gets a little bit more complex, particularly in HVAC, is what is my rate of return in the reduction of what's called runtime of my HVAC units. So if your utility bill drops by 20%, your runtime has also probably dropped by 20%. And runtime is how often does the unit come on and off. And if my runtime has been reduced by 20%, and I think I can get 15 years of normal life out of a unit, but now I can add 20% to that life because I'm using it less, I've now just benefited my church by not having to replace that unit as soon as I would have to otherwise. That's a massive rate of return that can help churches. So it's all three of those, Luke, when you're looking at how do I determine my rate of return? It's utility reduction, it's operational efficiency of staff, and it's runtime expansion. Has anybody ever gone out and gone to an auction and looked at a used police car? So you may find a used police car that's for sale that's only 4 or 5 years old. And for a consumer grade vehicle, that car probably has 80, 90, 100,000 miles. A police car of the same age will have 300 to 400,000 miles on it. So that engine's runtime is 3 to 4 times the consumption of a typical consumer car. It's that same kind of principle with our HVAC systems. If we can reduce the use of it, we reduce the runtime, which then, if you're continuing maintaining it, again, the caveat there is you still have to maintain it, change filters and so on and so forth. But if you reduce runtime, you should be able to extend the life expectancy of the unit. If it's a 10-ton unit and that unit's going to cost $35,000 to replace, and now I've extended it 2 more years, that's a big deal. And then the last thing as far as the focus is making sure that your staff is being utilized and on task. Think about what your staff is doing. Do you need 2 people to do certain tasks? I've been in churches over the last couple of years where I've observed facility staff people doing a simple task, even if it's just delivering packages, where there were 2 of them doing it together. And I've had to scratch my head and think, why are 2 people doing a task that 1 person can do? And so just, those are some focus areas. Here's something else that I suggest for you all, whether you're a facility manager or a business administrator, is making sure that you are organized. Being organized can save you time and money. So, do you currently do a weekly planner? Do you do a daily planner? I know that I'm not managing a facility, but I manage in a company. and I do a weekly planner, and then every day I have a daily set of tasks and plans that I want to do. We as a company, we actually have created a hit list. Lee, you want to explain what a hit list is? Okay, I'll explain it. High impact tasks. And so we actually bought these little notepads that everybody can use that have 3 items on it. And it's your high impact task. There it is. Lee, can you show me one of the actual sheets itself?
Oh, I should do it backwards. I can't see if you're seeing that.
Yeah, that's fine. So what we did is, what are your 3 every day? What are 3 high impact tasks that you want to be able to check off to get done? I'm not talking about creating your to-do list of 50 items, of which most of them you won't get to. But what are the most important 3 things that you need to do personally? What are the 3 most important things your team needs to do? The next would be to make sure that you've got adequate checklists so that you are able to check things off, your staff checks things off, and that they are not just busy work checklist items, they're critical, important things. Do you have specific room setup configurations that room 101 can only be set up these 1 or 2 ways? Instead of letting everybody just decide, oh, I'd like to do it in the shape of a W today and whatever else.
I was going to interrupt you real quick on checklists. So I also think, and I certainly have fallen victim to this before, where I'll create a checklist just to make it seem as full as I can, so I feel like I'm being productive. Where sometimes it's just the human nature. It feels good to check something off. But I think and I think there's slides on this later, but spoiler alert, I feel like it ties in well, is how can we prioritize very quickly what is important? And what tasks may we be able to delegate to other people that may not be in facilities? Like, for instance, staff cleaning. It's not necessarily a priority, and other people can do that if we give them that clear expectation. And don't get me wrong, it's also very important for this to be agreed upon at the executive level all the way down and have that expectation clear as a culture. But, emptying trash, that's another thing. Make sure your staff can take your trash to a central depository rather than you having to go and pick up every single one from the office. How many minutes could that save you on a week or day-by-day basis? So I think little things like that are very important to really take accountability to what is important on this checklist rather than just checking things to do them. And this, I don't have a slide to show this, but if anybody's familiar with Stephen Covey, I think is who it was, his quadrant of important versus urgent, it's very easy for us to do things as they're urgent, but we tend to neglect the important things because of urgency. And reality is, when you or your staff say yes to something, you're saying no to something else. Like if you want me to create a backdrop for your event rather than take care of a preventative maintenance task I've had scheduled because you think it's urgent, that's taking us away from something. So how can we make sure from the top down, people understand what is a priority, what's important, and what's not? So I just felt that tied in. Sorry to cut you off.
Oh, you're good. You're out of the will. No, just kidding. The centralized facility scheduler. I'm not going to go into any details because this whole webinar is not meant to be a sales pitch, but we know churches that have moved to a centralized facility scheduler regardless of which one they use. Obviously, I'm biased by my t-shirt, but that can save you time and keep you organized. Your preventive maintenance schedules with reminders. Do you actually have all your PMs kind of listed? Do you have it set up in such a way that you get reminders? And then having a CMMS, computerized maintenance management system to organize all of your maintenance so that you're not throwing paper around trying to figure out, stuff to do. A CMMS is a tremendous opportunity for you to stay organized and to stay on top of things, and also to track the efficiency of your staff. This will be some things that you probably should have if you're looking at a CMMS. And again, there are dozens of good ones on the market. I obviously have bias. But think about work orders on demand, preventive maintenance, vendor management, all the different things that can help you stay organized and more efficient. Oh, did I say that we happen to have one? Okay. Moving on. So
a lot of these tips I've already kind of hit on. I actually just hit on them, so I told you, spoiler alert.
yeah.
Some other things, you can go ahead and skip that one, Dad.
No, I think we didn't hit all these. So the staff cleaning, should staff clean their own offices, or is that something that a volunteer could do?
Or the crazy idea, this staff person can clean their own office. Sure. Wild, isn't that?
Yeah, Lee mentioned it, because you imagine having have all of your staff empty all of their trash into a single kind of receptacle that then somebody can wheel out to the dumpster. Same thing with that next one. If you invest in trash carts, instead of trying to carry 2 or 3 bags out to the dumpster at a time, that can save time. And if it reduces fatigue, it's going to increase efficiency.
It's also too, what can we do to prevent injuries? There's nothing worse, and there's nothing that's going to already make you feel less productive if people are getting injured on the job doing that thing. If you're already short-staffed, you don't want to be even shorter staffed and lose more. So what can we do to be quicker, and what can we do to be safer? And that's another big thing. When you come to prioritize these things, I think safety really needs to be huge on that list as well.
Yep. So think about table carts, dollies, chairs. I was with one of our clients the week of Thanksgiving, and they were talking about how they moved to round tables so that they could just roll them. And while that sounds creative, the problem is you can still only roll one at a time. And so if you had a table cart that you could put 4 or 5 of those on and then move them across campus, does that save time and efficiency? So think in terms of how do you move the things that you need to move? And it also will help protect your staff if they've got the right tools to do it.
Right. And hey, real quick, Ben said something. I know some of you can't see this in the chat because it's coming just to the host and panelists in some cases, but Ben said most of our staff had problems with simply emptying their own trash. And I hear you. Trust me, I do. That's why I also think it needs to be supported openly and verbally, set in stone by the executive team down. So it's created as this expectation. It's not facilities being the bad guy or being what sometimes people may see as lazy. It's really, we are understaffed. We are doing a ton of things that you have no idea that we're doing. And this is the expectation. So just making sure that's clear from the top down, I think is extraordinarily important.
Church staff sometimes thinks that the church should operate the same as Bank of America or Wells Fargo or someplace else where you go to work in a corporate setting. And when you leave at the end of the day, you leave your office a mess. And then the next day you come in and all the fairy dust cleaners have come. And now all of a sudden you walk into a pristine office again.
Right.
That's great when you're making the kind of margins and profit that a bank or a law office or somebody else makes. But at a church, again, getting back into this mindset of how do we get our entire staff to buy into the fact that these facilities have been entrusted to us. They've not been entrusted to the facility staff solely.
Yeah.
They've been entrusted to the church as a whole.
Yeah, and to piggyback on that again, I saw Dave said it'd be very difficult to get that from the top down. And that's why my dad and I kind of start with the data, is we can show people, hey, based on national standards, this is what being overstaffed or understaffed looks like. And I think being able to create your case from the top down is creating a case to show, hey, really, we're understaffed 1.5 people. You need to help me decide what's important, and let's go ahead and nail that down and see what other people can do, and kind of give them that expectation to say, hey, this could really be handled by you, and kind of creating that. And I know it's an uphill battle, but I think the data can certainly help in making the case.
Yep. Another tip is to clean out your building. Get rid of all the junk that you're not using. If you haven't used it in a year, get rid of it. I can't tell you how many times I do an assessment at a church and I get in the back of house, particularly in an attic behind the platform, and I find angel wings from 1960 that have been in this attic since the 1960 cantata. Y'all remember what a cantata is? You know, or I was actually at a church 3 weeks ago on a Sunday, and they still had overhead projectors and tube TVs stuck in a room that ate up half of the room, which made half of the room unusable. And it's like, clutter creates chaos. Clutter gets our mind feeling chaotic. Lee, I know, just finished a book that I read also called Essentialism, that talks about getting the clutter out of our life and thinking about what are the things that are really essential. And I assure you, while some good-hearted person paid for that overhead projector, you're never going to use it again. You know, donate it, get rid of it. Why do we keep chairs that have a broken leg for years and years and years and never replace it?
Yeah, and the other thing is, you know, just do some spring cleaning. I don't know about you all, but there was another book I read where it was like the idea of making your bed and your house is congruent to your mind and your workplace is congruent or a reflection in a weird way to your mind. And it's like when we begin to clean our rooms or clean our offices and things like that, we start to feel more clear-minded too. Clutter really will create chaos in that odd way where it's like, if we just clean, declutter, do some spring cleaning, get some stuff out of the way, it'll help a lot. And throw out the old literature. You're not going to use it. I see a lot of churches just hold on to all that old literature from 2 years ago. And a lot of them say, well, we're going to use it in the future. We may use it in the future. No, you're not. Throw it out. It's going to make your life easier and help you be more productive.
Yeah. So a couple more things. Does anybody own a billy goat blower? Does anybody know what a billy goat blower is?
It's a toy, and we hope this is a justification for you to get one.
So a billy goat blower is basically a large leaf and debris blower that's on wheels that you can push around. That is a great tool for if you've got a large parking lot, if you have sidewalks. You know, it makes the work so much easier and so much quicker for one person to do. It also, because it's on wheels, it doesn't require, it reduces the fatigue of carrying a backpack or carrying a handheld kind of thing. So just something to think about. And I can see I got a typo here because I was doing it really quick. When short-staffed, you need to catch things sooner. The sooner you catch things, the better. And so one of the things, and we've got a blog that's going to come out in a couple of weeks, about the facility manager's walkabout. So the term walkabout is an Australian term that they use about walking about the countryside. As a facility manager or someone responsible for facilities, it's critical for you to spend intentional time as part of your structured day doing a walkabout, whether that's daily, weekly. It needs to be intentional, and you need to be looking at things not just from a high picture standpoint. Are you sharing that on purposely?
Yep, I apologize.
Okay.
I did it just to throw you off.
Oh, thank you. Well, it worked then.
Good. And I actually have something to chime in and interrupt you further is, you know, if you are short staffed already and you have all these emergencies come up in your day, what can we do to prevent emergencies and to get it in a plan that we can take care of? So the sooner we identify things, the better we can plan, the better we can be organized, therefore the more productive we will be. Which I stole your thunder because that was where you were getting to, Dad, but had to share that also.
Well, thank you, my son.
Hey, it's my pleasure.
So this next one, and this is one that, again, a lot of you are going to say culturally as a church, we can't get here. Rethink who does room setup. So we've got Kenji on the phone with us. He's from Rock Church in San Diego, and large church, 5 locations in San Diego, and they have started making the change that facilities will bring you the tables and chairs or whatever else you need, but the ministry using the room has to do the setup and tear down. And that was a shift that they made after exploring what some other larger churches were doing, was getting the ministries themselves to do the setup and tear down. Think about the amount of time that your church maybe spends in setting up and flipping rooms and doing that. And if that's being done by your staff, is that really the best utilization of their time? So I totally get it that could be a real cultural nightmare for some of you.
Well, and let me add this too. So this is something I think is really something you guys need to pat yourself on the backs for, is you're taking the time to invest in yourself and do better at your job and at your role. A lot of the people who were there before you were not doing that. They were not trying to create proactive, new, innovative systems in place to be more productive at their facility. Do not just do things because that's all the way we always used to do it. You know, a huge component and why we are called Smart Church Solutions is how can we create new smart solutions for church facility management, right? And we are responsible as a facility manager because the reality is we were placed in our roles for a reason. So if we're just following the status quo, because that's what we've done for the past 50, 100 years, it's not that productive. If we can come in and implement new systems and be innovative and share this knowledge we're learning with others and creating that case, it's going to help you be more productive. So I love that the Rock Church especially is kind of thinking of ways, how can we make this different to be more productive? I think that's a huge thing too.
Yep. Lee's already said this, but make sure you get your buy-in of these priorities from senior staff. And just as a hint, I don't know that I would walk into senior staff with 15 demands or 15 things you want to change right off the bat. It may be good to have only one or two, have them be maybe somewhat less painful, and then make sure that you can show the win after you've had the win. It'll make it easier to get them to buy into something a little bit more challenging later. If you can show them that by making these little tweaks here and there, that it has helped them fulfill the ministry objectives of the church. Again, I said this in the last webinar that we did. Apostle Paul is my favorite author. Heck, he wrote most of the New Testament. But anytime he wrote a letter and he gave an instruction, he always gave the so that. And so if you can make your case to leadership, we need to make this little adjustment so that whatever that is, and then be able to come back to them after you've seen some results and say, remember that so that? Let me show you what so that has helped us with. And because we've been able to reduce X, Y, and Z time or utilities or run time or staff involvement in certain things, we've been able to focus more on this, that, and the other, or look, we've actually saved money here or there. So get the buy-in from your senior leadership.
We got a second for some questions, Dad.
I got one more slide.
Go for it. We'll do questions after. Go for it.
Okay. So a couple other things to do is track your time and that of your team. Again, going back to the fact that our survey showed about only 50% efficiency of our staff, particularly maintenance staff, it would be good to know how our team's actually fulfilling their week. Then think about what are the things that you should stop doing. Don't always be looking for the things you should be doing, but think of things that you should stop doing that you just don't need to do anymore. And then spend time organizing your week and your day, review your focus areas, develop a plan of attack for those. The next one is avoid time sucks. You know, is there somebody on staff that you know when you go by their office, they're going to need to take an hour of your time? How do you take a different path around the office so that you don't get sucked into that? Are there meetings that you need to reconsider whether or not you need to be a part of or not, or that your team needs to be a part of? Think of ways to avoid time sucks. And then learn to say no. As Lee said, every time you say yes, you're saying no to something else.
I was going to just tell you, that's some very strong language. Time isn't all that bad. Just kidding. Well, we have a few questions we'll take a second to answer. So Evelyn had a question: how much of property manager's time can also be doing maintenance and other facility tasks? And I think this will be a fun one to answer. Go for it, Dad.
Yeah, so it depends on your staffing model. So when we talk one FTE,
full-time employee
for your general maintenance, if your facility manager spends half of his time doing general maintenance, that means that you have a 50% facility manager and a 50% full-time employee doing maintenance work. And so there's not a right or wrong, but just know that the more actual physical tasks that your facility manager does or your property manager, the less management they're really doing, which means they're not maybe organizing, they're maybe not reviewing contracts or looking for ways to save money. They're doing physical work. So it becomes a case by case, but just know, again, if you say yes to them doing physical work, you're saying no to them doing managerial type of duties that could actually save you money in the long run.
All right. We got a question from Doug. I have a campus that is 66,000 square feet and I have 2 full-time employees assigned to it. The challenge is that campus is open from 8 a.m. to 10 p.m. Monday through Friday. And then we have Saturday and Sunday services, 1 on Saturday, 3 on Sunday, and evening meetings or small groups. How can he best estimate how understaffed I am based on usage, not square feet?
That's a great question. So if you look at the number of operational hours, and I can't do the math real quick because I still have my socks on and I need to take those off to count with my toes. But if you look at your operational hours versus your staffing hours, one of the things I would look at first is for what events do you have to have the staff there? So do you expect the staff to be there on Sundays? Because if something breaks, you want to have them there. You need to subtract that from their work hours. So because if they're kind of on call, they're not actually doing tasks in most cases. If you're looking at your square footage and you've got 2 full-time people doing that on a 7-day-a-week building, ours was predominantly looking at a 5-day-a-week building. You're going to need more. Actually, the report that we put out says you need 1 for every 25 to 35,000 square feet. So if you're going to use your building 7 days a week, then you're going to, which I totally applaud, by the way. Let me not disparage that. Then you're going to be closer to that, probably 25 square feet per FTE.
Yeah, and he also wanted to share, he has 3 campuses and only 3 total full-time employees for custodial work. He splits a full-time between 2 campuses. He also added that they want staff there most of the time for issues or cleanup.
Yeah, and that's a tough role. Again, I mentioned Kenji from Rock, where that's one of the things we're looking at. You know, they got 5 campuses. How do we properly clean them? How do we properly do the maintenance on it with a centralized staff? You know, campuses sometimes feel like they're the redheaded stepchild. No offense to anybody that's a redhead on the call, but you know, how do you get all those campuses clean, particularly if you're doing it with in-sourced cleaning people? It makes it really hard to be at 2 places at one time.
You can't call Tom out like that being a redhead. That's just rude.
I know, I'm sorry.
So John asked a question, where will this be available afterwards? So everybody that was registered for this will receive the recording through an email, but we're also going to upload it to our YouTube channel. I just dropped the link for our YouTube channel in the chat. If you would, please subscribe to this. We are getting new of kind of getting our toes into YouTube, and we hope to upload more educational videos there of both facility management as a whole and eSpace. Looking to do a few a week. So please feel welcome to subscribe to that and be one of our early supporters. And then Glenn had a question related to Doug's question. How does the full-time employee translate to a church with a day school about 150,000 square feet?
Yeah, it does not take into account a day school. So if you've got a day school, you've got to almost do a whole nother calculation on what's necessary for the day school portion of it. It makes it really complicated. And I know several of you on the call, because I know who you are, have schools. And the inclusion of whether it's a day school, say K through 8th grade, K through 12th, or it's a preschool, you add a whole new complexity to that, particularly on the cleaning side. The facility side, you still have X amount of square feet that you have to repair and change filters on and so on. And so some of that doesn't change. but from a cleaning standpoint and from a room setup and tear down, it's going to significantly increase. And so we have different calculators that we can look at to look at the amount of cleaning based upon the utilization of a space. And so that may be something that our team could help with.
And then I think we have one more question from John. Have you ever heard of models where we retain 2 staff and then utilize one of our contractor work crews for 6 to 8 weeks per year to make a big push? I should have mentioned that the 2 staff keeps us understaffed throughout the year as well. He believes he needs 4.
Yeah. I have seen, so when we talk even the 35,000 square feet FTE, that assumes a modest amount of preventive maintenance and outsourcing on your maintenance. If you outsource everything from a maintenance standpoint, other than changing light bulbs and so on and so forth, that FTE number can actually go up. It might be 40 or 50,000 square feet per FTE. It doesn't necessarily change your budgeting, because you're either going to pay for staff or you're going to pay for outsource. You're going to pay for one or the other. But if it makes better sense for the church to do it outsourced, that's one thing. The same thing with doing small projects around your church. If you have limited staff and you have to take that limited staff and ask them to start building walls and doing other stuff, again, anything you say yes to, you're saying no to something else. And so it may be that you need to think about outsourcing those kind of projects. Same thing with like day porter services on Sunday. A number of churches that we work with use kind of that day porter concept. Well, smaller churches, what if you had a volunteer that could be that day porter to make sure that the bathrooms are always clean, that the paper products are refreshed, that the trash is taken out, and so on and so forth. It's very common that we see day portering being an outsourced service for churches, particularly if you've got multiple services on a weekend.
Good deal. Well, any other questions we have, anybody else would like to ask or chime in, please feel welcome to. This is your last minute call. I hope you all found today helpful. We've really enjoyed being able to present with you all today, and thank you guys as always so much for your support. Doesn't look like we have any last minute questions coming in. If I do, I will stop myself and do it. Kenji, yes, we will provide the slides as well whenever we send the recording out, so that'll be a part of this as well. Well, everyone, thank you so much. Mr. Cool, thank you for your wisdom and your knowledge on the topic. We've really enjoyed it. And if anybody has any questions after this, please feel welcome to reach out to myself directly, Lee, L-E-E, @smartchurchsolutions.com. And we hope you all enjoy the rest of your day.
Thanks all.